Around over a month ago, I made two particular videos on the Batman games. One was Batman Arkham Asylum's boss fights rankings, and another one was Batman Arkham City's version. Now, it has been over a month since those videos have came out, and this one is definitely long overdue. There is one particular reason as to why it is overdue, and the reason being is because of the PlayStation 5, which screwed me over massively. Now, for 6 years having to be very restricted and limited to recording, I have been on the PlayStation 5 editing, recording, live streaming, etc., whatever you can think of to do YouTube, to do content creation, and it is very limited. One of the limitations being that some games don't allow recording, whether that's live streams or video capture, and essentially this wouldn't have been a proper video if I didn't have that footage of this game, which was the ending parts between the Arkham Knight's reveal and Scarecrow's last sort of sequence with him. However, I'm done with that sob story. I've managed to finally get to it. It's very long overdue, and this is my Batman Arkham Knight's boss fight ranking. Now, there are 8 boss fights in total, given I counted correctly, because in the other videos I don't seem to do so, and I also sometimes confuddle what actually are boss fights and what isn't. But I have very distinctly watched my gameplay, and I have looked back and determined that there are 8. 3 of the 8 being Batman's Batmobile boss fights, which there's not many, but they are only all related to the Arkham Knight side. Without further ado, I'm going to be ranking this from worst to best, highest to lowest, and explaining, as always, in detail why. So, let's get into it. Coming in at number 8 is the first Batmobile boss fight you get in the game, and it is the Arkham Knight's helicopter. Not the hardest boss fight by all means throughout the game, but it is one of the more simple ones, and with it being one of Arkham Knight's vehicles and unmanned, it just doesn't bring much of a challenge, and I don't necessarily enjoy it too much. Ace Chemicals, in my opinion, being one of the most boring missions in the game, considering it is one of the first, really just also suits the fact that this is quite a boring boss fight, but it's okay because it is only the beginning and it is just a sort of introduction as to what the Batmobile might bring later on. I do like the idea that it is a bigger version of another drone that you do face later on in the game, but those drones aren't a boss fight, so I will not consider or talk about them whatsoever. But with not having much more to say and just being a bigger version of another drone that flies rather than the ones you face on the floor, just doesn't really cut it for me, so unfortunately I leave this one in number 8.
Don't be shy. There's room up here on stage for 2. No, really, I insist.
Coming in at number 7 is Johnny Charisma. Now, he isn't a hand-to-hand combat character, but he does have a stealth side. You play as Robin, and you have to try and defuse 5 different bombs that he has placed around the room before you can get behind him and defuse his bomb vest. Now, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, there is a timer, and you have to try and defuse the bomb before he stops singing, otherwise you lose. Now, you also have to try and avoid a red spotlight that if he sees you, you also lose, so patience is a big thing in this one. I do like how you have to be patient, as I've mentioned, and it is very stealthy, but it just doesn't really have that hand-to-hand combat, and he isn't really a threat, or doesn't at least pose one. But I don't mind it, and it is very different and very story-driven, as the Joker is in Batman's head, portraying the stories that happen between Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. But like I said, not posing much of a threat, It's more of a sequence than a boss fight, but because it poses a challenge and a stealth, I do appreciate it more, so I leave Johnny Charisma in number 7.
Come on, lady. We need to get you someplace safe.
Are you kidding me? I'm getting front row seats!
Coming in at number 6 is Christina Bell. Now this one you could argue could have been in even number 8 for example, but the reason she's in number 6 is the thugs you fight. She's only really protected by thugs and you don't really get much of Christina Bell involved, but it's just not really... I would say it's better than Johnny Charisma in terms of the actual physical combat you get, but she does have a little bit of a sequence and essentially she attacks Robin, but the story behind her is she just has a massive crush on Batman, and I'm pretty sure she was a school teacher or a school principal before she got infected with Joker's blood. But that doesn't really do justice, and this one was actually really hard, so potentially I might have actually put this one in a higher spot than it really deserved. And to be honest, I would definitely agree with any of you guys to disagree with this ranking position. But because of the thugs, because of who you face, and because of the character she is, she's not really going to be able to defend herself too well, so she uses thugs to protect her, as she's worried that Robin or Batman will get her and she doesn't really want to get caught. This one was really hard to blabber on about and really hard to make a reasoning as to why the ranking is in the way she is. But that isn't really going to change right now, so I'm going to just leave Christina Bell in number 6.
Come on.
This is it! The fight of the century! You ready to get schooled, Bats?
Coming in at number 5 is Albert King. Now definitely the most deserving of this spot, as out of all of the sequence and all of the other rankings I have done within this part of the game, is the only combat hand-to-hand that you have with any of the characters. So you're fighting a massive boxer dude who in the game I believe is a champion, and essentially you need yourself and Robin to take him down, and you have to do it in combat, which I really like. It is the only one, and he is a big guy, so obviously you have to have a little bit of challenge to go along with that, and face a bunch of thugs as well. It definitely does make for a very unique boss fight, and I do like the fact that it is hand to hand, but it is all of the same. Not that you really can do much different. However, what I do like about it is the fact that the dual takedown that you do does eventually change as he gets weaker. At first it is just a couple of kicks and punches, and then eventually you do end up getting real close and personal with him and taking him down with Robin or Batman. I do like how it's set in the Wild West scene, as he does look almost like a Wild West style of boxer. I don't know if that's just me, but his character model definitely looks like that. It just works well for some reason. But there's not really much more to say, as you are just fighting him with your bare hands. It is hand to hand, as I did want, and that is why he is deserving of the number 5 spot.
I did ask if it came in black, but then I thought, you just get all jealous.
Coming in at number 4 is the next Batmobile boss fight, and it is the Arkham Knight's Excavator. Now right off the rip I want to say this one is really cool, as you are trapped in a tunnel, so there is not really a way out, and this one is more just a cat and mouse game, and you have to run away before you get crushed. But the only way to defeat him is by going towards the end of the tunnels while getting away, and there are bombs placed at the end which he runs through, and that is how you defeat him. So off already I've said that this is a completely different way of defeating something, as this isn't really head to head, but there is many other ways of defeating him. I do like, as I've said, how it is underground. However, it is just the fact that it is all cat and mouse, and you have to end up running away from him anyway, and all you really have to do is make sure you find a tunnel which has bombs at the end, which is all of them, which are based on a map at the bottom right of your screen, and that is it. That is literally it. You just have to run through the tunnels and make sure you don't get caught. What I do like is how there is a bunch of obstacles in the way in the tunnels, and you have to try and be smart in avoiding them, which means paying attention. it does actually almost get your legs shaking a bit and your tensions rising and your nerves going, as you are under the pressure of trying to get away from something massive trying to crush you, and it is almost as fast as your Batmobile. But because it is a cat and mouse and you're not really head to head, it definitely isn't the best Batmobile boss fight out there, so I definitely have to say that this one is number 4.
Who are you?
You really have no idea, do you?
Bruce. Jason. But you're dead.
Coming in at number 3 is the Arkham Knight, aka Jason Todd boss fight. Now this one is in number 3, not because it's bad by all means, it definitely is one of the best, but it does miss a couple things that I appreciate about the next 2 boss fights. However, I will get into that when we get to those. As of right now, let's talk about this boss fight. This one was one of the best, as it revealed who the Arkham Knight was all along, and if you followed the story, essentially the Joker had lied to Batman about killing Jason Todd, who was Batman's old Robin before getting replaced. But he ends up on a revenge spree trying to kill Batman for the years of torment that the Joker put upon him, and feeling like he was almost just forgotten. This boss fight doesn't necessarily do much, as you do go head to head with him, but you actually face him on top of gargoyles where he reaches a sniping position. You do have to face a couple of his army, a couple units of his army I guess you could say, and try and get to him while not getting spotted. There are a lot of challenges and he definitely throws a lot of curveballs at you, but I think in terms of story, this is definitely one of the best boss fights in the game. But because you're not really hand-to-hand combat with him, and you are just trying to get on top of him to interrogate him, and to just essentially tell him that he is not what the Joker made him, and that he is still the Robin that Batman trained him to be, that killing instinct from Jason Todd wasn't necessarily ever going to go away. He just felt a lot more anger and still had that killing feeling, but did it for justice rather than revenge. I do appreciate how they almost made this entire game about him. They put hints that he was Jason Todd all this time under our nose, especially with the Joker's sections where he was telling the stories about Jason Todd, about how he almost was hinting who he was by telling the stories and reminding us of what happened in that asylum and reminding us of what happened to him in there. I think in terms of storytelling, it's amazing and it definitely deserves the number 3 spot. But because you aren't necessarily fighting him, but you definitely do have a bunch of interactions, definitely does make him a number 3 spot taker.
Oh, you found another tree. Well, I've still got the cloudburst. You want to finish this? Come to Bleak Island.
Coming up in the runners-up spot is the final Batmobile boss fight, and it is the Cloudburst tank that the Arkham Knight uses. Now, the Cloudburst tank is responsible for the dispersal of the fear toxin that Scarecrow wanted to disperse from Ace Chemicals, but used it in a tank instead, which you have to try and destroy while it is being defended by a lot of Cobra tanks. Almost 7 Cobra tanks have to be destroyed before actually being able to destroy the Cloudburst tank, but the Cloudburst tank unfortunately is too strong for the Batmobile. So, when you end up destroying a coolant line in the tank, you end up having to run away from the Cloudburst tank as it is too strong, and the Arkham Knight essentially chases you down in his own tank. It isn't, as I've said, a very hard boss fight, as all you have to do is run away and try not to get hit, which isn't too hard, but it definitely almost does raise my nerves as I have to try and escape from the tank. It definitely isn't very pleasant. Eventually you do go 1-to-1 and you do end up destroying all the coolant lines, and the tank ends up getting weak. So you can destroy the actual core of the Cloudburst and eventually destroy the tank, with the Arkham Knight actually controlling it. It's the first drone he uses that he controls. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's great, as it is almost again too repetitive, and once you have destroyed the strong parts of the tank, eventually you do just end up going one-to-one with it, which is what I like. But when it comes to a Batmobile boss fight and the opportunities and things you can do with the Batmobile, I think they slacked off a little bit. But nonetheless, it is a very cool boss fight. He does drive a really cool tank, and that is why he is in the runners-up spot.
I don't care who you are, but they will.
Coming in at the #1 spot, and whether you guys have the same thoughts as me or not, I like to call this one Batman's own boss fight. It is his own boss fight, as he fights himself and he fights his own psychological battles, as essentially I believe in this game the Batman ends up going insane and ends up almost shaping into the Joker, as the Joker had such a big role and his biggest fear was the Joker taking over Gotham. But there is other parts to this that I really do like. The horror aspect and the way that it almost 180s and Batman gets into Joker's head while he's in Batman's head is really confusing. But the way that Batman can change things, and that he almost, he makes weeping angels of himself, and he ends up making Joker believe what he didn't want to believe, and that is that he will be forgotten. Batman, in this particular part of the game, it feels like more of a psychological boss fight, because it's all happening in Batman's head rather than actually physically happening. So it is more of just, rather than physical, it is mental, and I do really like how they switched that up massively, because really the biggest harm in this game was what was going on in Batman's head and not what was going on outside of it. But I must admit, the Joker almost playing still as the main villain really makes it even more interesting, and Scarecrow almost knew how to exploit what Batman's biggest fear was, because as everyone in the Gotham universe knows, is that Joker was Batman's biggest enemy. But because of its psychological and horror aspect and shape-shifting into different forms of fears, it almost just is a real life situation where people face battles and there are ways to defeat it. But in the end, realizing that Batman doesn't actually end up really having any more fears, because his biggest fear was the Joker. It really was crazy to see that when the Joker was locked away and couldn't control Batman anymore, just what is Batman's biggest fear now? And that is my question. But nonetheless, that is my belief, and that is why I think it is deserving of the #1 spot. And there we have it. Finally, that is my Batman Arkham Knight's boss fight rankings video. I know it was very long overdue, but it's here. If you guys have any games that have boss fights and you guys would like me to rank them, then please do let me know. Likewise, in the comments, if there is anything about this video and the rankings that I've made that you disagree with, please do let me know, and I would love to hear your guys' response. But without further ado, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye.